Hello everyone. Today I'm going to show a modern miniature played between Magnus Carlsen and Anish Giri. This was played in the Tata Steel 2011 at YKZ. Let's check out the game. Starts with d4, knight f6, c4, g6, g3, bishop g7, bishop g2, and d5. So we have the fianchetto variation of the Grunfeld. C takes d5, knight takes d5, and knight f3. Knight goes to b6, a common idea. Knight c3, knight c6, and e3. Black castles, white castles, and rook to e8. Rook e1, a5, gaining some space on the queen side. And the common idea over here is queen to e2. But Carlsen over here played queen d2, which is slightly inaccurate. It leads to e5, striking in the center. And after d5, gaining some space, knight b4. e4, just solidifying the pawn on d5, and c6, trying to undermine white center. a3, challenging that knight. Knight doesn't want to go back to a6, but c into d5, this is a refutation of white's play. We can say, because after the piece is captured, the knight on the pawn captures back on b4 and rook into a8. And before capturing the rook, black has the Zwischenzug, the in-between move. Sorry, the Zwischenzug is actually the correct term for the in-between move, b into c3. You grab back the piece, and after b into c3, knight into a8. So black is up a pawn, and now e into d5. But it will be difficult for white to hold on to this pawn, and we'll see why. Queen into d5 was an idea, but that leads to knight b6. And after queen a5, let's say queen f6 and bishop g5 and queen c6. So black is doing quite fine. Black has a slight edge over here. But anyway, after e into d5 was played, this is not the best. Knight b6 anyway. Puts pressure on d5 and rook d1 defending. An idea could have been d6, but then that leads to rook e6. And if c4 immediately, knight into c4 and queen into queen b4 and knight d6 creates a blockade of that pawn. And black, of course, is ahead a pawn anyway. Bishop e3 can activate the pieces and get some activity for counterplay, but black is slightly better here. Anyway, rook d1 was played, defending the pawn, and e4. And here Carlsen blundered. So actually, white's position is bad. If the knight goes to e1, then bishop g4 hits the rook, and f3 leads to e3, hitting the queen. And after queen e2, the bishop can go back to d7 and reroute itself to a4. So let's say bishop into e3, but bishop a4. Finally, the rook can move, but let's say rook d2, but bishop into c3. This is also quite good for black. Another option was after e4, knight d4 and give up the pawn on d5. That was also one of the consideration, but that's not very good. But the move Carlsen played actually blunders a piece. He played knight g5. And what happens here is it allows e3. Of course, the queen can't capture because the rook is defending the pawn. And if you capture with the f pawn, then the knight is lost. So queen b2 and queen into g5 anyway. Now it seems that the knight on b6 is hanging, but the pawn on e3 is very strong. So if queen into b6, then there's e2, rook to e1, and queen into c1 even. After rook into c1, you can just promote and get a queen, and white is forced to capture, and you capture back. And it's a deadly, this is a common theme sometimes, that the bishop has to defend on f1 and the bishop can come on h3 and the king is trapped. There's a very deadly threat of rook into f1 checkmate, and even pushing the f pawn will not help against that. So this would be dead lost. So after after queen into g5, bishop into e3 was played first, going after the queen and the knight, although simply queen g4. And this ended the game. because the rook is under threat. So there's no time to grab the knight, and if you move the rook, knight c4 is coming anyway. And if, let's say, f3 were played, trying to hit the queen, knight c4 anyway, hitting white's queen. So it would lead to perhaps the queen b3, but queen d7. The rook on e3 is also hanging, so there could be a swap of pieces, and black is left with with having an extra piece at the end of the variation. So after queen g4, Magnus Carlsen resigned, and a very wonderful, almost miniature victory for Anish Giri. Well, that's the game. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you soon for the next game.